Yo, what is up guys? Grim here, and today we're going to talk a little bit more about Elder and Shaper influence. So there's a bit of a new strategy floating around about how you can kind of get the ping pong effect going after the nerf is coming in 3.3. I just watched a video by Fien. You can go check his video out. It'll be in the description below, but basically he's come up with a sort of new concept that you'll have. He called it an Elder Square. I'm going to call it an Elder Bubble because it doesn't really look like a square, but you can basically create a zone of Elder influence and create ping pong effect on all of the maps that you like. So that's what we're going to be going into today, and I'm going to kind of cover how you set it up and a few of the restrictions behind the system. So to start off with, Elder Influence obviously looks like this, and it can spread and is very unpredictable in where it goes. So you might have like a small area of Elder Influence, and it might just decide to grow by like 3 or 4 squares or shrink by 3 or 4 squares. So we need to understand that Elder Influence is very unpredictable. So the next thing is, with the nerfs coming in, you can't sustainably keep Elder, as we understand it, in one place permanently if you spawn him in. So when you spawn him in, he's basically going to move after a certain amount of time or certain amount of maps you run if you don't interact with him, and that kind of contradicts what we're trying to do here. So you don't want to spawn Elder in is basically the gist of it. The next rule is we need to understand how Elder spawns himself in. So basically, once you have 20 maps influenced by Elder on the Atlas, so that means 20 of these tentacle kind of maps, that's when Elder will spawn himself in one of those areas that is influenced by him. So the idea is now that we want to create a patch of Elder influence which is less than 20 maps large, and we want to contain him in that area and try and create the ping pong effect which we're all so used to. If you don't know anything about this, then there's tons of other videos on YouTube which you can check out to kind of learn the basics about this influence. So what we want to do is kind of set up a little bit of an Elder territory and contain him. So this is kind of a pretty common conclusion that most people came to, but it wasn't seeming to be very efficient because you'd have to start running bad maps to kind of cut him off in places. He can be very unpredictable and just move into different areas, and it just wouldn't be too great. But Thien, in his video, has kind of come up with a bit of an interesting idea that you'll kind of plant him in a very specific spot, and all the maps around him will be maps that you're running, so you can kind of contain him. And if that sounds a bit confusing, don't worry, I'm about to go into a little bit more detail. So here is an atlas. So what I've done on this atlas is I've marked pretty much every good map that you could run. So the reason I've done this is because it'll be very easy to see what I mean about containment maps. So let's just say we want Elder influence on Strand and Arid Lake. We want to have the ping pong effect. So we can actually achieve this using this new system. So if we wanted ping pong effect on Strand and Arid Lake, we would want to get Elder influence on Beach, Desert, and Iceberg. So once we have that Elder influence there, he's actually not able to go up at all. But you're probably thinking, oh, well, whenever I run Strand, he's going to go and take over Arid Lake and come down this way. That's the idea of this strategy, though. You pick certain containment maps to keep him in one place, and both of those, or all of those containment maps, are going to be maps that you want to run. So in this example here, Strand and Arid Lake are both going to be maps that we're rotating between and running kind of side by side. So let's just give a scenario. Let's say we've got our Elder up here and it's all good. We have a bunch of shaped strands and a bunch of shaped Arid Lakes. So let's say we start off with Strand. We sexton it up. We run 3 of them with our ping pong effect. So we'll go Elder, Shaper, Elder. And after we've run that, Elder decides to spread all the way down here, down to Jungle Valley and all that kind of stuff like that. And we're like, oh no, that's a disaster. But not to worry. Now that we've finished our strands, we can move over and start running Arid Lake, which will then contain the Elder and chop him off from moving any further down here. So now that we're finished with our strands, we'll move over to Arid Lake. We'll run our 3 Arid Lakes with sextons. It'll be great. It'll be the ping pong effect, just like before. But then Elder will decide to maybe move up here, and we can cut him off by going back to Strand. So it's kind of this alternating strategy, which will allow you to kind of ping pong the Elder and Shaper influence like you used to. But you're probably thinking, well, those maps aren't too great. They don't really drop any good div cards. The density is pretty bad. And you're using a corner, so that's kind of just cheating. Yeah, you're right. It is just cheating. But there is a few other kind of locations on the Atlas which are very good. The next one that I want to talk about is the one up here. So Underground Sea is currently the best map in the game, probably for running. It's got some crazy div cards in it. The density is probably the best in the game, and it's got a very easy boss to kill. So let's say you wanted Underground Sea. So if you were to set up a kind of containment bubble here of Elder Influence, you'd probably setting up the Elder Influence over here. So one of your containment maps would be Underground Sea, which is a very good map. So what other maps do we have here which we could use to contain the Elder Influence and rotate through to cut him off? So we have Channel here, Gorge, Volcano, Atoll, and Ashenwood. So when you're creating your Elder Bubble or Square, you probably don't want to go over 10 maps in sort of the kind of containment zone, because that'll make it so that if the Elder decides to spread 5, 6, 7, or 8 maps while you're running your 3 maps here, then he could actually spawn himself in. So 10 is a pretty good number, and it's very safe. So if you can limit how many Elder maps you're kind of setting up in your bubble to 10, that's probably the safest, and it's going to make sure that the Elder never spawns in. So with this square or bubble, we would set up Elder Influence on Maze, Grotto, Cells, all of these maps here, and we could choose to have our containment maps be like Underground Sea, Channel, Gorge, and Volcano, which are all very good maps, and they're also very different kind of tiers. So you could have your 6, your 10, sorry, you could have your 11, your 10, I believe your 9, and this would be another 9, but you can kind of get around that just by running one of them. But yeah, you wouldn't have too bad of a time containing your Elder Influence here, and you could theoretically get a permanent ping pong effect by rotating through these 4 maps constantly and kind of just chopping off the Elder Influence. So if he came all the way up here, you'd run a set of Underground Seas. If he was starting to come around here, you could run a set of like Volcanoes or Gorges, and that would chop him off there. So pretty good. Not too bad there. But you're probably realizing rotating through 4 maps, that's not so great. So really, you want to try and limit the amount of containment maps that you're kind of using and try and get as small amount as possible. So another very popular map is Burial Chambers. So right here we have another kind of elder bubble we can make. You can put in a non-desirable map if you so choose, but that will mean that you're rotating between burial chambers and like springs. That would create a bubble here, and you've got your 2 containment maps, which would allow you to maybe do 3 burial chambers, do 1 springs to contain, go back to 3 burial chambers, 1 springs. You could kind of do it like that, but I'm not too big a fan of that. I don't like running maps which aren't efficient. So in my opinion, one of the best elder bubbles or rings or whatever you want to call it on the Atlas is this one here. So you would put your bubble as Bone Crypt, Mudgazer, and Phantasmagoria, and rotate between Toxic Sewers, Cemetery, Dunes, and Wastepool. All these maps are some of the best in the game. They're all very quick layouts to run for Alva and the Incursions, and that would essentially allow you to have Elder Influence and Shaper Influence ping-ponging fairly permanently, as long as you're pretty decent at upkeeping these. So you would have, like, you'd rotate through them depending on where Elder chooses to go and Shaper chooses to fight him back. So you just always want to keep it under 20. So you do have a lot of flexibility because the bubble is only 3 large here. So you can actually choose to cut off massive parts of it. And contain it very late. Kind of, you could almost skip having to rotate to some maps and keep. So you could like do 6 dunes and then decide to rotate and cut off some Elder Influence if you wanted. But that's not necessarily exactly how it'll work. But yeah, this is kind of like the idea. You're basically going to choose a location on the Atlas, fill it in with some Elder Influence, and then pick some containment maps which cut off the Elder Influence. And kind of make a circle around your influence and just constantly kind of run those in a fashion that will cut off the Elder Influence. And that is how you'll achieve your ping pong effect. However, this is annoying if you're someone who likes to do Guardians. That will leave your kind of bubble open to being destroyed. If you're someone who likes to do like Shaper and stuff like that, I believe that will as well. And it actually limits your map choices fairly heavily, much more than the Elder Ring ever did, which is a bit unfortunate. But it is a new method that we can use to get that ping pong effect. Due to the fact that the Elder Ring is dead and the ping pong effect is dead, outside of this, Elder and Shaper bases will be far more expensive, so it may be even more lucrative to do this kind of strategy, and that might be very good. So that's kind of going to be this video. Hopefully you guys have learned something like this. Again, shout outs to, I think his name is Thien. Very good video from him. I'll link that in the description. But yeah, this is just a little bit of info for you guys. I'm not necessarily going to do this. It seems like a lot of work, but if I was going to do it, this would be my setup. I'd be Toxic Sewers for my 10, Cemetery for my 11, Dunes for my 12. I'd probably do something like Shore for my 13, and then Waste Pool for my 14. And that's going to be that. Hope you guys have enjoyed the video. There might be another one today. But yeah, just look out for that, guys. Thanks for all the support. Like if you like and all that good stuff. See you in the next one. Cheers.